Can I get a sound check? How is the sound if I talk like this? Just waiting for a sound check. Just need to make sure my sound is good. Check, check. Testes, testes. 1, 2, 3. And if I can't get a sound check in 40 seconds by 6 minutes, I'll just go ahead and start. I have faith in the equipment. Welcome to the final part of reading the entire Department of Justice report on Phoenix Police. We last left off on page 100. There's a link in the description of this live stream if you want to follow along or if you want to check out the report for yourself. It's important to read and understand all of this report because we're seeing many of our leaders give really bad responses to the report, and we have to do our diligence and be as educated as possible to show that this is not a political farce, to show that this is indicative of real problems at Phoenix Police and probably elsewhere, and to not take accountability for the things in this report is a sign of an even larger problem. So here we go. Page 100. To be sure. Hold on really quick. Let's see what kind of we were talking about. People with behavioral health disabilities. To be sure, even with improvements at the 911 call center, there will be some behavioral health calls that will need a police response. Phoenix PD should modify its CIT program to ensure, that's Crisis Intervention Team, CIT program to ensure that the officers sent to such calls are well trained to accommodate people's disabilities. After the typical 40-hour CIT training class, Phoenix PD requires no ongoing or refresher training for officers to maintain CIT certification. However, continuing education is integral to a successful CIT program. Phoenix PD has a general policy on individuals with disabilities, but no CIT-specific policies to guide CIT responses and interactions with other officers. Phoenix PD recently assembled a committee to evaluate the quality of CIT responses, but the committee does not generally review calls involving force and is limited by Phoenix PD's failure to accurately identify pertinent calls. Phoenix PD must do more to ensure its CIT program is effective. Finally, to accommodate people with behavioral health disabilities, Phoenix PD must train its officers in true de-escalation. Some behavioral health-related incidents will certainly need an immediate patrol response, but many more do not. As long as Phoenix PD trains officers to misinterpret a person's behaviors and use force quickly, people with behavioral health disabilities in Phoenix will continue to experience trauma, physical harm, and unnecessary arrest rather than behavioral health treatment. Researchers have found that the success or failure of alternative response depends largely on the decisions made inside dispatch about which type of responder to send. Phoenix has made a number of attempts over the years to respond to people with behavioral health disabilities in the way that best meets their needs. But Phoenix PD call takers and officers alike still treat behavioral health issues as dangerous even when they are not or fail to identify them altogether. To ensure the success of its alternative response programs, and to avoid continued violations of the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, Phoenix PD must commit to giving 911 operators the training, tools, and support necessary to do their difficult but critical jobs. And when there is a need to send police, Phoenix PD must prepare its officers to modify their response to properly accommodate behavioral health disabilities. Phoenix PD fails to modify practices during encounters with children. Phoenix PD does not take into account the vulnerability of children and their stage of development. As one sergeant explained, we don't really treat youth any differently than adults. Consequently, Phoenix PD's problematic tactics on unlawful conduct can have particularly harmful consequences for children's physical and mental well-being, including higher post-traumatic stress, increased levels of depression, and diminished academic performance and sleep. To assess Phoenix PD's policing of youth, we reviewed policies and analyzed body-worn camera footage. We interviewed Phoenix personnel, including those involved with the school resource officer program, local and state community organizations, juvenile public defenders, group home and school administrators, social workers, and academics. We also spoke directly with children and their parents. During encounters with children over minor issues, sometimes where no crime has been committed, Phoenix PD officers escalate situations with combative language and needless force. Excuse me. Can I get a sound check, by the way? Is the sound alright? With combative language and needless force. In one such incident, 2 officers threw a 15-year-old Latino boy against a bus stop pole, held the back of his neck, and handcuffed him after he asked to call his mother. While on patrol, the officer saw the boy briefly look inside a truck in a car dealership's parking lot during business hours, then leave to catch the bus. The officers followed the boy onto the bus and ordered him off. The boy listened to the officers and followed all of their orders. But when one officer demanded that the boy take off his backpack, the boy looked up at him and asked why. The officer's response was aggressive and demeaning. Because I fucking told you to. The officer then ordered the boy to stand up, turn around, and place his hands on his head. The boy started to do as he was told, but then looked down at the phone in his hand and asked whether he could call his mother. The officer immediately grabbed him, held his neck, and slammed him into the pole of a bus stop. The boy's hands remained above his head until officers roughly cuffed him. The officers also questioned the boy while he was handcuffed without informing him of his Miranda rights, and performed a warrantless and unlawful search on his backpack. They later released the boy but lectured him that the entire encounter was his own fault. In another example, an officer handcuffed a teenager after confronting him at his workplace about a traffic citation. 3 months earlier, the officer cited the teenager for speeding. According to the teen, the officer told him to shut the fuck up after he asked him to call his mother during the stop. When the officer learned that Phoenix PD did not process the citation due to a technical error, he reissued the ticket and went to the grocery store where the boy worked to get him to sign it again. The teenager was confused. He had been to court for the ticket and did not understand why he was being asked to sign something. According to the teen, the officer snapped, threatened to take him to jail, handcuffed him in the middle of the store, and would not release him until after a Phoenix PD lieutenant came to the scene. The next day, the boy's mom helped him file a complaint about the way the officer had treated him. When asked by a supervisor, the officer admitted that he may have told a teenager to shut the fuck up, but it was because the teenager was argumentative and verbally combative. A sergeant found no policy violations and did not discipline the officer. Phoenix PD officers also use excessive force during encounters with kids. Nearly every child we interviewed complained officers closed handcuffs on their wrists so tightly that they reached the point of pain and injury. The abusive application of handcuffs is unconstitutional. For some children, officers put on handcuffs so tightly that their hands went numb and left marks on their wrists for months. Others said they sustained deep cuts on their wrists, and when they asked officers to loosen the cuffs, Phoenix PD instead tightened them further. In 2022, officers handcuffed and used neck restraints on a 13-year-old boy with autism who had walked out of school without permission. An officer spotted the boy walking alongside a road near the school and told him to stop. The boy kept walking, and the officer ran after him, grabbing his arms from behind, tackling him, and holding him down. With the officer's knee in his back and hand on his neck, the boy pleaded to be let go. "My mom's right there. I can't breathe. I'm just trying to get home." Over the boy's phone, his mother could be heard screaming, "I'm coming." When she arrived, she told the officer her son had lung problems. Despite this information, the officer held the boy by his sweatshirt hood as he forced the boy to his feet. The officer then handcuffed the boy and shoved him. The officer then unhandcuffed the boy and shoved him towards his mother, saying, "He's your problem now." "What's your issue?" the boy asked. "Why don't you shut the fuck up?" the officer replied. The tackle and neck restraint left abrasions on the boy's arms and neck, but we saw no evidence that Phoenix PD recorded the incident as a use of force. When the mother complained to Phoenix PD about the way officers had treated her son, a supervisor defended the officers' conduct, saying that they used reasonable and necessary force to detain the boy for leaving school without permission. There he is. This young man has autism. He left school without permission. And he's not even close to being an adult. At no point was he... Let's see, what's the worst thing he possibly did is, "What's your problem?" is what he said. It's a pretty valid question, you know? A Phoenix PD officer grabbed the 13-year-old boy by the neck of his sweatshirt and forced him to his feet while the boy's mother arrived on the scene. See, look, right in front of his mom. Phoenix PD officers often question people without informing them of their right to remain silent or to call an attorney, in violation of Miranda v. Arizona. Questioning children in custody is particularly coercive, as children are more likely to believe they have no choice but to answer an officer's question, even when that questioning is unlawful. Phoenix PD has a Miranda warnings card that translates the Miranda warning into child-appropriate language and gives children the options of asking for a parent before questioning. But we reviewed multiple incidents in which Phoenix PD officers did not use the card and ignored the requirements of Miranda altogether, questioning the children in custody about the specifics of alleged offenses without first advising them of their right not to answer. The demeaning way that some Phoenix officers speak to children also increases the harm they experience. During interviews, youth told us that Phoenix PD officers' comments left them feeling traumatized and degraded. One teenager reported that an officer performing a pat-down said, "If I was your dad, I would have beat the fuck out of you." Another youth shared that he felt fearful and angry after officers called him and his siblings gangbangers. "Officers talk to you like they hate you," he said. Disparaging and disrespectful language from adults in position of power can have a lasting effect on kids. It can also contribute to fear and distrust of law enforcement from the next generation of Phoenix residents. I believe that concludes the 5 major findings. We're going to now look at contributing causes. Page 105. Contributing causes to violations. The pattern of unconstitutional violations we described above is due in part to poor accountability, policies, training, and supervision at Phoenix PD. Over the years, Phoenix PD has taken steps to increase accountability, but these efforts have not led to meaningful change in behaviors or outcomes. Between 2016 and 2023, the city paid over $40 million to settle claims of police misconduct in no fewer than 75 claims or lawsuits. In 2023 alone, the city settled cases for more than $12 million. I'm telling you guys, for the right type of sick, twisted person, this report is a business plan. In 2023 alone, the city settled cases for more than $12 million. There are outstanding claims asking for millions more. Several payouts came from encounters in which Phoenix PD internal investigators found no violations of department policy. The city is presently litigating cases involving Phoenix PD's responses to protests, treatment of unhoused people, and use of excessive force. To understand Phoenix PD's systems for supervising and holding officers accountable, we interviewed investigators, supervisors, and other personnel responsible for setting performance standards and assessing conduct. We reviewed a random sample of hundreds of complaint investigations closed between 2016 and 2023 and other relevant records and data. We spoke to city officials and community members involved in oversight. Finally, we spoke with dozens of people who have tried to file misconduct complaints, local advocates, community groups, police unions, neighborhood associations, community organizers, and others pressing for greater police accountability in Phoenix. Phoenix PD lacks effective systems to hold officers accountable for misconduct. Phoenix PD's Professional Standards Bureau, PSB, handles complex investigations of serious misconduct that could result in significant discipline. An officer's direct supervisor typically handles minor misconduct investigations that could lead to discipline not greater than a written reprimand. Both types of review are considered formal investigations that entitle officers to certain procedural rights, such as written notice of the investigation, union representation, and the opportunity to be heard. In practice, Phoenix PD handles most complaints informally as administrative inquiries that require no formal investigation. Phoenix PD opens an administrative inquiry under two circumstances. The first type of informal inquiry is for allegations of minor policy violations or performance issues that might result in non-disciplinary counseling or training. The second type includes any allegation, even a serious misconduct allegation, that an investigator or supervisor does not believe constitutes a policy violation. Phoenix PD decides an allegation should be handled as an administrative inquiry after a cursory assessment of the complainant's credibility, reviewing body-worn camera, video, or looking at officer reports. The agency classifies most complaints, 82.3% from January 2017 to April 2022, as administrative inquiries. Investigators have wide discretion for handling administrative inquiries, as no policy describes the appropriate process. Despite layers of review, administrative inquiries routinely demonstrate investigative failures, such as overt bias in favor of officers and the failure to collect or preserve material evidence. Phoenix PD fails to accept complaints of officer misconduct. As a federal district court in Arizona observed, a non-intimidating complaint intake process is essential to having a constitutionally adequate internal investigation process. In Phoenix, it is difficult to complain about police misconduct, in part because Phoenix PD both discourages people from making complaints and discourages officers from accepting them. When people file a complaint, Phoenix PD warns them that they may face criminal liability for, quote, misrepresenting a fact or, quote, misleading a peace officer. One person we spoke to worried that he risked going to jail if there were any inconsistencies in his complaint. He explained, "It felt like I needed to be very careful with my words. It felt like an intimidation tactic. Felt like it was designed to make me not want to talk to them." The complainant also said that he had to call Phoenix PD at least 3 times to get through to Professional Standards Bureau, only to be told 11 days later that no misconduct had occurred. Some people do not make complaints out of fear of retaliation or because they think they will not be taken seriously. In other instances, officers and supervisors outright ignore complaints. We also spoke with complainants or listened to recordings of conversations complainants had with investigators in which PSB debated whether their experience with Phoenix PD was unprofessional, biased, or retaliatory. Phoenix PD has threatened some citizens with arrest for trying to make a complaint. Phoenix PD also effectively discourages officers from reporting misconduct directly to PSB. While Phoenix PD policy requires officers to call supervisors to the scene of alleged misconduct, it does not explicitly address direct reporting to PSB. Phoenix PD supervisors confirmed their expectation that the chain of command would make the decision to refer misconduct to PSB, not individual officers. It is important for supervisors and commanders to identify and address misconduct, but PSB should also be accessible to any officer who wants to make a complaint. Even if PSB is alerted to misconduct, it may not open an investigation. According to PSB personnel, the decision to move forward with an investigation is a moving target. Some of these decisions are documented in a phone log database where PSB records all its calls, walk-ins, and emails. Among the phone logs are many records in which complainants allege serious misconduct, only for the investigator to close the complaint shortly after intake with minimal review. In one case, a person called PSB to complain about her treatment during a traffic stop. According to the phone log, the woman alleged that the officers pointed their guns at her and illegally held her in the back of a patrol car for 45 minutes. I think it was racial profiling, she said. Investigators documented the case closure in a phone log that same day, noting nothing she said indicated there was any policy violation during the incident. Miranda warnings. As described above, supervisors often engage in cursory reviews that find no fault when officers use unreasonable force. Their incident reviews fail to recognize other constitutional violations as well. During encounters, officers routinely violate the rules imposed by Miranda v. Arizona, which requires police to inform people before in-custody questioning of their right to remain silent, to consult an attorney, to have an attorney present during questioning, and to have an attorney appointed if they cannot afford one. We reviewed cases in which officers questioned people in violation of Miranda even after they clearly invoked their rights. Even when raised in a citizen complaint, Phoenix PD's systems of accountability failed to identify and correct Miranda violations. A person called Phoenix PD to complain that he was questioned after invoking his right to counsel and then mocked for doing so. The officer's body-worn camera video confirmed what the complainant told officers. "I'm going to call a lawyer. I don't want to talk to you anymore." An officer began questioning the man, who was still on the phone with his attorney. The man repeated, "I don't want to talk to you no more." A second officer said, "I think he's talking to his lawyer because we're abusing his rights." Despite the clear invocation of his constitutional rights, officers asked the man 3 more rounds of questions. Investigators did not include the complainant's allegations regarding Miranda in their report, which refers instead to officers making jokes. The report states that footage of 13 officers' body-worn cameras were inspected by 3 tiers of supervision. Despite this careful review, the report does not mention the Miranda violations and concluded that the allegations were baseless and without merit. County prosecutors declined to prosecute all the man's charges. When PSB closes a complaint in a phone log, including the example above, the record is rarely linked to the accused officer or tagged for the specific allegation made. Phoenix PD also summarizes multiple complaints from different people about unrelated incidents in one narrative. Supervisors in the field may not document complaints at all if they address them informally. The resulting incomplete record means that Phoenix PD cannot track the true number of complaints made across the department, nor see how often specific officers receive complaints. The process has effectively buried citizen complaints, obscured patterns of misconduct, and shielded officers from supervisory review. Number 2, Phoenix PD fails to conduct thorough and fair investigations. When Phoenix PD does open a misconduct investigation, like 13% of the time or something of total complaints, it is often deficient. Oh no, I think it's 17%. Investigators show bias towards officers and routinely fail to investigate all allegations. Phoenix PD does not take steps to prevent conflicts of interest. For example, Phoenix PD referred multiple complaints related to the summer 2020 protests to supervisors who oversaw the protest response. In closing the complaints, these supervisors tended to conclude allegations of misconduct by officers under their command were meritless. In another case, a man complained to a sergeant that an officer had exceeded the speed limit and behaved unprofessionally during a traffic stop, telling the man, "I am not afraid to scuffle. I will follow the fucking law, and you can back the fuck out of my face. You may have just stepped into a world of shit." When the sergeant spoke with the man at the scene, he defended the officer's conduct, saying, "I don't blame him for cursing at the man." Later that day, the man contacted PSB to file a formal complaint about the incident. PSB then sent it to the same sergeant for investigation. Unsurprisingly, the sergeant found nothing unprofessional during the contact. Guy complains about a sergeant to Professional Standards Bureau at Phoenix PD. Professional Standards Bureau sends it to that sergeant for investigation? Guys, they're saying this is it's so important to pay attention to our leaders' responses to this. They're saying that this is a political farce. It makes me sick. I'm waiting for a single political thing in here. I'm waiting for a single thing that doesn't seem to add up. I'm waiting for a single thing that says this is Joe Brandon's DoJ gone wild. We're seeing actual people in actual situations. We're hearing actual words from the Phoenix PD officers themselves and of their bosses and of their bosses' bosses. Guys, what's political about this? If you can find a page number, I mean... Investigators also consider their own views about an officer when assessing the credibility of a complaint. One PSB investigator relied on his prior experience supervising an officer without any tie to the underlying incident to dispense with a complaint. In that case, a rideshare driver called PSB to complain that the officer was aggressive and rude, allegedly telling him, "Do you know I can ruin your whole day right now by giving you a citation? I can ruin your whole entire career today by giving you this ticket." In closing the complaint, the investigator assured the complainant, "I have not seen him act unprofessional during my time supervising him. And if you say his attitude was unprofessional or rude, that's like very subjective. But as far as a full-blown investigation, there is no investigation because there is no misconduct." Investigators also skip key investigative steps, such as speaking to all witnesses, reviewing all evidence, or identifying all allegations. For example, a woman complained that 5 Phoenix PD officers retaliated against her for refusing to sign a citation. The woman said officers arrested her and held her in an overheated patrol car without air conditioning in the middle of the summer. The investigator looked into the conduct of only one of the 5 officers involved, did not speak to the complainant or civilian witnesses, relied on another officer's summary of the body-worn camera video. Like, what? Made no finding about whether the complainant was held in an unreasonably hot patrol vehicle, and otherwise found no violations. A person complained that an officer arrested him in retaliation for attempting to record the officer while the officer was searching and arresting someone else, and then lied on the arrest report. The investigator sought to collect video evidence from the complainant, but failed to reconnect with him after a few attempts. The investigator closed the file even though he had sufficient information to proceed, including the accused officer's name and badge number and the date of the incident. Had the investigator pulled the incident report, he would have identified at least 2 other witnesses to the incident. Investigators also failed to appropriately consider whether officers have received similar complaints in the past. In one case, store surveillance video showed an officer slapping a handcuffed shoplifting suspect hard enough to knock him from his seat. The man suffered an orbital bone fracture and swelling to his face, neck, and back. Phoenix PD had previously suspended the officer for striking a suspect in handcuffs and had received complaints from 2 different people complaining of similar misconduct in the 4 years before the complaint. The deficiencies in Phoenix PD's investigations are due in part to ineffective training of investigators. New PSB investigators do not attend a formal training program. Instead, they shadow more experienced investigators and certify that they have read the relevant policies. Even though field supervisors handle most misconduct complaints. Guys, how awesome would it be to be a Phoenix PD supervisor for all these years? Getting paid big bucks, investigating yourself. Like, good Lord. Sorry. I'm trying to keep my comments to a minimum. Even though field supervisors handled most misconduct complaints, newly promoted sergeants receive only a 90-minute overview of the investigative process when they are first promoted. Phoenix PD does not require PSB investigators or supervisors to take specialized training on internal investigative techniques or legal issues such as the rights afforded by the State Peace Officers' Bill of Rights, collective bargaining agreements, or the duty to report exculpatory evidence. Number 3, Phoenix PD fails to adequately discipline officers who engage in misconduct. Phoenix PD administrators discipline in accordance with a discipline matrix. The level of discipline is set to the most serious of the sustained violations. Additional sustained violations can be considered aggravating circumstances. Phoenix PD also uses progressive discipline, where the officer's recent history of misconduct can escalate the consequences that stem from new sustained policy violations. The chief is the final authority over discipline. Officers have the right to appeal disciplinary decisions to the city's Civil Service Board, a five-member board appointed by the City Council. Get on that board, guys. Phoenix PD affords officers multiple opportunities to challenge findings or misconduct or negotiate discipline. When a formal investigation concludes, but before the final determination, the officer who is the subject of the investigation has the right to an investigative review process, a hearing during which the officer receives a draft of the investigative report and any underlying support, including interviews. The officer and their representative may then meet with the investigator and their unit commander to challenge the allegations brought, findings made, and any discipline that may result. Misconduct findings become final only after the investigative review process is completed or waived. For serious misconduct, including excessive force, officers also have a chance to dispute what discipline should be imposed. The Disciplinary Review Board, which is a group composed of an officer's peers, Phoenix PD leadership, and members of the community, reviews sustained investigations and makes recommendations to the chief for the appropriate level of discipline. Once again, the subject officer may review all materials shared with the board and may appear in front of the board to argue why a proposed outcome is unjustified. Complainants are not allowed to attend the disciplinary review board and may not present evidence or testimony. Officers may appeal to the chief, put forth new evidence, and negotiate resolutions. Phoenix PD does not track how often findings are changed as a result of officers' repeated opportunities to influence investigations and their outcomes. But we found that these opportunities, which exceed what the law requires, have led to overturning findings or downgrading discipline, even where the underlying factual findings have not changed. For example, PSB sustained an allegation that an officer lied to investigators about receiving and refusing to sign a criminal traffic citation, a finding which likely would have resulted in his addition to the Brady list, if not also increased his likelihood of termination. After the IRP and subsequent hearing with the chief, PSB changed the finding from sustained to unresolved, and the officer accepted a 240-hour suspension without appeal in lieu of termination. The failure to properly discipline has led to officers engaging in repeated misconduct. Really quick, guys, this whole section is after all of the misconduct is already done, right? After they've beaten the homeless people and thrown away their stuff and violated multiple parts of the Constitution. After all of that, guys, number one, they don't even investigate these things when complaints are brought. Okay, no, actually, it starts before that. Number one, they train their officers to avoid complaints, and they make it hard to complain. When they do get a complaint through, they don't investigate it. When they do investigate it, the officer has way more chances than necessary to give his own input, to read everything that was submitted, and to negotiate what's going to happen to him. You know, at every single level, there's a massive failure of accountability. Guys, what's political about this? I'm still looking for something political about this. The failure to properly discipline has led to officers engaging in repeated misconduct. One officer avoided termination by persuading Phoenix PD to convert his discipline to a suspension. The officer was arrested for driving with a blood alcohol level of 0.154, which qualified as an extreme DUI in Arizona, while carrying a firearm for which he was not certified. Violations that the officer admitted to. Find his name, guys, find his name. At the time of this DUI, the officer had been with Phoenix PD for 2.5 years and had been found to have violated minor policies in 3 prior investigations. Find his name, guys, find his name, guys, find his name. We need to know who that is. The officer had a disciplinary hearing scheduled with former Chief Williams, and for reasons not apparent in the file, Phoenix PD canceled that meeting. Find his name, find his name, find his name, find his name. Instead, the officer struck an agreement to take a 120-hour suspension and a written reprimand. Less than 1 year after serving the discipline, PSB investigated the same officer. Less than 1 year after serving this discipline, PSB investigated the same officer for starting a sexual relationship with the victim of a crime he was assigned to investigate. Find his name. PSB sustained the allegation, and the disciplinary review board recommended termination. The former chief again rejected termination and imposed a 240-hour suspension with a last chance agreement. Find his name. The officer remains employed at Phoenix PD. Find his name! Even if the chief issues discipline, it may be reversed. In 2021, Phoenix PD terminated an officer who shot and killed a man only seconds after he answered his apartment door. The Civil Service Board reinstated the officer 5 months later, and he remains employed by Phoenix PD. The city of Phoenix agreed to pay the man's family $3 million to settle their claim. In another example, Phoenix PD tried to terminate an officer 3 times before it finally stuck. Like, what does that mean? Phoenix PD tried to fire the officer in 2019 for making knowingly false statements on a search warrant affidavit, then lying to sorry guys, sorry for yelling earlier. I didn't want to hurt anybody's ears. I get really guys, I'm sorry. I won't yell anymore. Phoenix PD tried to fire the officer in 2019 for making knowingly false statements on a search warrant affidavit and then lying to PSB investigators in the subsequent investigation. The Civil Service Board reinstated the officer, get on that board, even though this was the second time the agency tried to terminate his employment. The first time being in 2009 for failing a drug test. And even though he had served multi-day suspension in 2018 for interfering with a felony criminal investigation, interfering with a felony criminal investigation on behalf of a friend, and in 2019 for failing to complete supplemental reports in 34 ongoing robbery investigations. In 2021, in its third attempt, Phoenix PD successfully terminated the officer when he was criminally charged with fraud. 4. The city's implementation of the Office of Accountability and Transparency does not provide effective handling of civilian complaints. In May 2021, the city established the Office of Accountability and Transparency, OAT. I was going to say OAT, but I'm going to say OAT. After years of calls from community members, check this out. In May 2021, the city established the Office of Accountability and Transparency after years of calls from community members for civilian oversight. We've been begging. The process was the subject of months of debate about the structure, powers. Oh yeah, I remember this. The police demanded that they get their own place on the police review board. This was some funny stuff. The process was the subject of months of debate about the structure, powers, and independence of the agency. In creating OAT, the city's goal was to ensure complaints against officers are handled fairly and objectively, and it gave OAT jurisdiction to investigate, I'm going to say OAT, jurisdiction to investigate and monitor Phoenix PD's use of force, in-custody deaths, and other community complaints. Implementation stalled, however, when the state legislature passed a law to limit civilian participation in the investigation of police misconduct. I remember this. The police said, we want a couple of seats on that police review board, and all the people said no. And so they said, okay, well, we're going to make a law that you can't. Like, that's the stuff we're dealing with, guys. When the state legislature passed a law to limit civilian participation in the investigation of police misconduct. Let's see, what's 124? Arizona law now requires that any entity that investigates police misconduct must be made up of at least 2/3 officers from the agency. Can you believe that? Guys, this is a law that's on the books. Arizona law now requires that any entity that investigates police misconduct must be made up of at least 2/3 officers from the agency. That's the opposite of what you want. You want to encourage outside agency review for best accountability and transparency. I mean, Still, the city hired a civilian director and non-sworn investigators to monitor cases and issue reports. OAT began monitoring investigations in September 2022. OAT is still finding its footing as an agency. That means it sucks. But it is not clear whether it will be able to deliver consistent and effective civilian review of Phoenix PD. If you want to say something sucks in a really nice way, you have to say it's still finding its footing as an agency, as a program, as a person. One community advocate we spoke to expressed frustration that the model of independent oversight they championed has been shredded. Exactly right. What kind of independent oversight is 2/3 of the people in the organization? I feel like I'm going insane sometimes, you guys. I'm not the crazy one. You guys are the crazy ones. Not you guys. I mean, like the Arizona legislature. We're not the crazy ones. They're the crazy ones. I'm perfectly non-crazy. I have not been crazy for years. I'm one of the least crazy people you've ever met. OAT published its first monitoring reports in early 2024. OAT has provided pointed feedback that echoes some of the same issues we described above, such as Phoenix PD's failure to classify or investigate complaints of racial bias and the problems with administrative inquiries. Phoenix PD has responded to the first 2 reports with proposed actions. The OAT reports also complain that Phoenix PD has not fully cooperated with OAT in sharing information, despite a formal agreement between the 2 agencies. For example, what do you expect with 2/3 of... For example, Phoenix PD has failed to notify OAT of relevant incidents or provide timely and complete documentation. OAT's first director resigned in January 2024, I remember this, alleging the city compromised OAT's independence, an allegation the city and the new interim director dispute. It is unclear whether OAT in its current form can keep its promise to promote fair and objective misconduct investigations. I hope you guys are all real smart, and I know you will. But I hope you guys are catching on to a lot of the finer stuff that we're seeing here. The main thing is that there's failures at every single level. They don't investigate themselves. When they do investigate themselves, they won't investigate. They'll call it an administrative procedural thing. When they do finally get an investigation, they'll probably just dismiss it based on no, guys, sorry, I don't want to repeat myself. There's failures at every single level. And again, I do not think that this is a wild police department. I think that this is pretty standard stuff. Maybe I'm the crazy one. Poor policies and deficient training contribute to Phoenix PD's, we're almost done, guys, Phoenix PD's systemic legal violations. Due to deficiencies in policies and training, in many of the incidents described above, officers were doing what Phoenix PD trained them to do. Officers' illegal use of neck and leg restraints stemmed from Phoenix PD's failure to guide officers on the appropriate use and limits of these restraints. The numerous unlawful arrests of protesters during peak protests in 2020 can be connected to Phoenix PD policies directing officers to incarcerate as many people as possible after declaring an unlawful assembly. We also found systemic problems with Phoenix PD's methods for developing and implementing new policies. Until 2023, Phoenix PD's policy unit was effectively one detective who had a mainly administrative role. Phoenix PD entrusted policy development mostly to individual units with minimal oversight. public input was largely limited. In the past, Phoenix PD has made public commitments to change policy in response to high-profile incidents or public scrutiny, but in some cases, we found little follow-through. For example, Phoenix PD announced it would develop a foot pursuit policy after a 2015 ASU study found that foot pursuits often preceded Phoenix PD police shootings, a practice that we also saw in some of the shootings we reviewed. The policy apparently took over 6 years to implement. We asked about the lengthy process when we interviewed officers assigned to Phoenix PD's Center for Continuous Improvement, a unit responsible for making recommendations for policy and training changes. The lieutenant told us he thought the written policy had been completed in 2015 or 2016, but had no idea what happened to it. That's what happens when you try to make a policy change at Phoenix PD. The policy apparently, I'll repeat this, the policy apparently took over 6 years to implement. This was a policy to stop foot chases, or to change foot chases, in an effort to stop people from getting shot. They tried to make a policy change, but the policy apparently took over 6 years to implement. We asked about the lengthy process when we interviewed officers assigned to Phoenix PD's Center for Continuous Improvement, a unit responsible for making recommendations for policy and training changes. The lieutenant told us he thought the written policy had been completed in 2015 or 2016, but had no idea what happened to it. That's what happens when you try to make a policy change that makes people safer at Phoenix PD. Phoenix PD training also contributes to the pattern of violations we described above. This is not because the training academy lacks resources. No, we know that. As Interim Chief Sullivan told us, facility-wise, this is the best facility I've seen in any department. Despite these resources, Phoenix PD has not developed a comprehensive training plan to ensure officers receive up-to-date training on legal standards and effective tactics. Officers need only the minimum training required to maintain state certification, typically 8 hours per year, along with firearms qualifications. Wow. As a result, officers receive little training on constitutional practices in critical topics like use of force, stops, searches and arrests, de-escalation, and engaging people with behavioral health disabilities. I'll throw in bystanders with cameras and people engaging in First Amendment protected activities. And when officers opt in to receive specialized training, it often primes them to engage in unlawful and dangerous behavior as described above. We also found Phoenix PD's training programs for new officers lacked consistency and uniformity across the department. Before 2021, each precinct and unit administered its own field training officer program, with minimal supervision from the training academy. Phoenix PD revamped the on-the-job training program in 2021. Earlier that year, the city had hired law enforcement consultants at 21CP Solutions to review the department's FTO program, in addition to its handling of the 2020 protests. The city refused to allow us to review the 21CP report, so we cannot assess what deficiencies the report identified or whether the changes to the FTO program address those concerns. In any event, Phoenix PD leadership told us that the department sought more uniformity in the FTO program. Phoenix PD now operates the FTO program out of 3 precincts and exercises more centralized control over each site. But the field training officers we spoke to said that individual precincts sometimes reject directives on how to run the program and make unapproved decisions to customize the approach. Phoenix PD has taken steps to improve policy and training, including during our investigation. For example, Phoenix PD completed the Arizona Law Enforcement For example, Phoenix completed the Arizona Law Enforcement Accreditation Accreditation. Accreditation. No, accreditation isn't correct. It's accredit. Sound it out. Accredit. Maybe it is accreditation. Accreditation. Okay, sorry guys. Program certification. I just fried my brain doing that. Oh man. For example, Phoenix PD completed the law enforcement program certification, invited wide public comment on several key policy revisions, and expanded its policy unit with sworn and non-sworn staff. Sorry, guys. Oh, man, hold on. Guys, this police misconduct is making me literally insane. Phoenix PD finalized a new use of force policy in late 2023 after months of development. And Phoenix PD began to require officers to attend trainings on active bystandership for law enforcement and integrated communications, assessment, and tactics. Whoa. Active bystandership for law enforcement, ABLE, and integrating communications, assessment, and tactics, ICAT. ABLE aims to empower officers to intervene and prevent harmful conduct. ICAT is a use of force training designed to help officers safely and lawfully respond to volatile situations. But Phoenix PD needs a comprehensive plan to address its current offerings of problematic training, incorporate the new training, and ensure the academy consistently promotes constitutional policing. And just kidding. This plan must recognize that years of training have ingrained a force-first culture at the department that will take a concentrated effort to change. That's super important, so I'll repeat it. This plan must recognize that years of training have ingrained a force-first culture at the department that will take concentrated effort to change. A lot of people, when they say all cops are bastards, they just mean all cops are bastards. Some people, when they say all cops are bastards, that's what they mean. They mean that the culture has become so normal that the entire department on a system level has gone haywire. There's no cop that can fix it. The training is bad. The oversight is bad. The civilian oversight is actually just 2/3 cops. You know, when people say all cops are bastards, they mean policing is a bastard. Phoenix PD does not adequately supervise officers. Robust supervision is essential to safe and effective policing. Supervisors at all levels have a role in enforcing policies and upholding standards among their subordinates. Supervisors who fail to do so should be held accountable for misconduct and poor performance. Phoenix PD regularly falls short of these expectations. Part of the problem is structural. Precinct commanders are afforded significant discretion in how they execute public safety strategies. Unlike most other large city police departments, Phoenix PD does not have a CompStat or equivalent. in which commanders report to department leadership about crime trends and policing strategies. We saw little evidence that leadership coordinates geographic crime strategies in any systemic way. Interim Chief Sullivan confirmed CompStat is a process we are still building. In this report, you'll find that Phoenix police literally did not have a crime reduction plan until 2023, last year. They had no plan to combat crime specifically. They had no system for reporting to leadership crime trends and policing strategies. Why are we giving them so much money? And what are they doing with it? It's that OT. And it's all them guns and tanks and stuff. Probably. Even within precincts, individual officers have significant discretion in how they use their time. For example, Phoenix PD's 911 dispatchers do not assign specific patrol cars to respond to calls for service. And Phoenix PD does not evaluate whether the appropriate number of officers respond to each call, nor provide guidance to officers. Instead, officers on patrol may respond to the scene of any 911 call if they are available. We observed these practices in our ride-alongs. Interim Chief Sullivan told us that he was unaware of Phoenix PD analyzing how officers spend their time or make decisions about enforcement. This is so huge. I should repeat it 2 more times, but I'm only going to repeat it 1 more time because I care about you guys and your time. But please pay attention. Interim Chief Sullivan told us he was unaware of Phoenix PD analyzing how officers spend their time or make decisions about enforcement. So if there was no crime reduction plan before 2023, if there was no CompStat system in place to report crime trends and policing strategies in general, and if there was literally Phoenix PD was not analyzing how their officers spend their time or make their decisions about enforcement, what was everybody doing for all these years, and why are we paying them? Am I insane? I mean, are they insane? Remember, guys, they said this was a political farce, and I'm still looking for it. I'm still looking for the part where there's a lack of factual basis for what the findings in the report are. If there's not a specific situation with a specific cop and a specific civilian for every single one of these complaints, and then some, where's the political part? How is this a farce? Our Maricopa County attorney, Rachel Mitchell, the highest attorney in all of Arizona, said this was a political farce with no support. Okay, I'll buy it, I'll buy it. How is it a political farce? But they won't have any answer to that. They won't have any answer to this stat is wrong. You did this study incorrectly. Everything I'm reading is above board. Everything I'm reading is able to be followed by a normal, everyday civilian without any kind of specialized knowledge. The report is plain and clear to all but the absolute most brainwashed dipshits that there's nothing political about this, that there's nothing farcical about this. I hope you guys get where I'm coming from. And please pay attention to the police unions. Please pay attention to Maricopa County Attorney. Please pay attention to the city of Phoenix. They have nothing to say for this except for they play this. They play the crybaby card of this is a political farce, and they'll play the, oh, what, you don't back the blue? If only you would just walk in my shoes for one day on one shift, and you would just see it my way. These are the things they say in defense of the things that we're reading now. Makes me want to puke. Phoenix PD supervisors lack essential tools for identifying concerning behavioral patterns and making key personnel decisions. Former Chief Williams acknowledged the need to know an employee's full history to make the best decisions, but Phoenix PD limits supervisors from documenting or acting on certain performance problems. Supervisors are implicitly encouraged to omit negative comments or misconduct from supervisory notes and performance evaluations. They are also limited in how much they may consider an employee's history of misconduct when making discipline, promotion, and transfer decisions. Phoenix PD's long-standing practice of deleting misconduct records from the department's files adds to the challenge of appropriately addressing uses of force and officer misconduct. One of those sentences, I won't do it, but another sentence that deserves rereading, guys. Please, please, please. Please pay attention to this report if this is interesting. If you have any interest in this or any stake in this game, please know what's happening in this report. Thanks for hanging out with me and listening. I appreciate you guys listening to me ramble. State law requires law enforcement agencies to keep employee records, including discipline, for 5 years beyond an officer's employment. Before 2021, however, Phoenix PD was required to send misconduct records to the city's Human Resources Department at an employee's request and destroy the records that police supervisors and internal investigators could access within Phoenix PD systems. Phoenix PD also periodically purged thousands of misconduct records that did not result in formal discipline. Since 2021, Phoenix PD no longer allows officers to request a purge. Great, thanks. Since 2021, they can't just allow all of their discipline records to be deleted. The hell are we doing here? It's like, guys, I almost yelled again. I'm sorry. Almost yelled again. Since 2021, Phoenix PD no longer allows officers to request a purge, but thousands of misconduct records remain inaccessible to Phoenix PD supervisors because of these practices. Our analysis of Phoenix PD's files show that 53% of misconduct cases opened in 2016 are now purged from Phoenix PD's systems. If you're dumb at math, guys, that's called most. These purge records prevent supervisors from assessing information about their officers. Accessing information about their officers, shield officers from public scrutiny and internal discipline, and allow problematic officers to remain employed and win promotions even when they have a pattern of misconduct. What's political about that, guys? What's Joe Brandon's DoJ gone wild about that? We need to stop asking them. We need to stop asking our leaders about the report because they'll say, oh, it's a political farce. We need to start asking them, why have 53% of misconduct cases opened in 2016 are now purged? We need to start asking them, all this other stuff. I was going to say something else, but I couldn't find anything to say. Phoenix PD has also repeatedly rehauled the agency's early identification and intervention program. The goal of the system is to alert supervisors to officers who may be having performance problems based on the patterns in their enforcement activities, complaints, and other criteria. Phoenix PD has replaced its early intervention program 3 times in the last 7 years. The current system, which started in 2021, has resulted in only one formal intervention 1 year later to address an officer's attendance and punctuality. Meanwhile, we found no intervention for an officer who, from April 2021 to April 2022, reported using force 11 times, including an officer-involved shooting, his second in 8 months, and an incident that resulted in a death in custody. In the same span, this officer also pointed his gun at someone on at least 8 occasions, had an out-of-policy high-speed vehicle pursuit that resulted in significant property damage and civilian injuries, an out-of-policy minor traffic accident, and at least 2 other allegations of potential misconduct. The officer generated 13 alerts, none of which compelled a supervisor to intervene. What's political about that, guys? We need to stop asking them about the report. What do you think about the DoJ report? We need to start asking our police union and our county attorney, why was this guy not flagged for intervention for all this stuff he did, including all that stuff I said that I won't even bother to say again. My time is way too valuable for that. I would even tell them that too. I would even say that right to their face. Do that. Finally, Phoenix PD impedes effective supervision by allowing officers to use the muting function on body-worn cameras. Phoenix PD policy requires officers to activate their body-worn cameras during law enforcement contacts, such as stopping a car or interviewing witnesses to a crime. The policy does not address muting, though the department has configured its body cameras to enable this function. Officers frequently mute their body-worn cameras following a use of force. Many times we saw no clear reason for muting. Yet officers and sergeants routinely did so. In other incidents, the timing of officers' decision to mute raises concerns that they did so to intentionally obfuscate or to enable more free conversations that they knew were inappropriate. In one example, after deploying chemical munitions against summer 2020 protesters, one officer told another, "I'm up here assaulting those guys. Next thing I know, I see your guys launch gas at them. I'm like, oh yeah, thank God, this is great." About 10 seconds later, the other officer looked down at his colleague's camera, noticed it was recording, and told him to mute it, which he did. D. Phoenix PD tolerates disrespect towards the people it serves. The failures described above have allowed for open disrespect within Phoenix PD of certain Phoenix communities and for the celebration of retaliatory violence to proliferate among officers. For example, final 10 pages, guys, of this thing. We're getting to the final stuff of the recommendations at the end. Thanks for all your time. Let's smash out this final 10 pages. Oh, here we go. The good night left nut guy. This is good stuff, guys. For example, following a 2017... Oh, yeah, if you think it's crazy that they're openly disrespecting and having celebratory reactions to retaliatory violence, stay tuned for about 2 seconds. For example, following a 2017 protest at which officers unloaded canisters of tear gas on peaceful protesters, Phoenix PD officers circulated a challenge coin, a memento normally used to commemorate moments of valor and pride during service. This challenge coin instead depicted a protester whom an officer shot in the groin with a 40mm impact round. The coin showed an image of the protester with a star over his groin and the words, "Good night, left nut," encircling him. On the back, the coin read, "Making America Great Again, one nut at a time." When supervisors learned that a box full of the coins and related memorabilia had been found at a Phoenix PD precinct, they decided to throw away all evidence of the coin and created no record of what had happened. Don't worry, we'll get to see the coin. And although they prohibited officers from having the coins at work, they did not refer the matter to PSB to investigate how this box of inappropriate collectibles mocking a protester ended up in a Phoenix PD precinct. There he is. Good night, left nut. Making America Great Again, one nut at a time. Phoenix AZ, August 22, 2017. This was a peaceful protester, guys. I don't believe there were any charges against him. I could be wrong about that. More than 3 years later, local news reported on the coin, connecting the coin's "Good Night Left Nut" slogan and an imagery to hate speech. Yeah, "Good Night Left Nut," that has some sort of, "Good Night Left Nut" has some sort of connotations that I'm not really familiar with. Maybe someone could explain it in the chat what "Good Night Left Nut" means. Good night left slogan and imagery to hate speech. Immediately, Phoenix PD issued a public statement denying that the department sanctioned the coin and claiming that a review at the time by a commander with the department was unable to substantiate any claims of misconduct related to a challenge. Like, if that's really a real quote, that's even concerning on his face. Like, what is you mean? Because, like, you got the word about the coin part, right? The coin part is challenge coin, right? Like, you know about the whole coin part? When asked to clarify the scope of Phoenix PD's claimed review of the challenge coin, 2 Phoenix PD commanders declined to speak with Justice Department investigators about the topic. Look at that, guys. Something pretty shady happens. I'd love to know if this is an actual real quote that actually does not mention the coin. Shockingly fails to mention the coin, and then they refuse to speak to the DoJ about it. Guys, you want to talk about political? They're the political ones. They're the ones not participating in this review process. They're the ones sticking up for each other literally via political means with the police unions in the city. Where's the political farce? I'm sitting here in an undisclosed location near the parking garage in downtown Gilbert. Where's the political farce? It's on the other side. Rachel Mitchell, that's where the political farce is. Wow, I'm really shocked. Review at the time by a commander with the department was unable to substantiate any claims of misconduct related to a challenge. I haven't seen a even single typo in this report. I have to imagine that's an actual real quote that strategically and significantly just doesn't even mention the challenge coin. Maybe I'm looking too much into this, guys. That's raising huge red flags. As a result, well, this is all. Look, forget any kind of quote. Forget what is it, challenge or challenge coin. Why aren't they even talking about the coin? This is what you need to know. When asked to clarify the scope of Phoenix PD's claimed review of the challenge coin, 2 Phoenix PD commanders declined to speak with Justice Department investigators about the topic. That's all you need to know about the challenge coin. As a result of this inaction, and despite significant media attention and scrutiny 5 years after the challenge coin's initial appearance, Phoenix PD has continued to celebrate the incident in training. As we describe in Section D of this report, with Justice Department investigators observing, an instructor in a 2022 training described the incident as a textbook shot into the lower abdomen. The instructor then boasted that Phoenix PD executed search warrants on the protester's home and workplace, causing him to become jobless and homeless at the same damn time. Phoenix PD took a similarly casual approach when, in June 2019, the news organization Injustice Watch found social media posts by Phoenix PD employees, including supervisors, celebrating violence against protesters. In one posting, the message "Mace in your face" appeared with an image of a police officer spraying pepper spray into a man's face as another officer looked on. Other posts endorsed explicit violence. Former Chief Williams admitted that the posts and the comments clearly promoted and created hate, and she directed PSB to investigate. But PSB chose to classify many posts pertaining to protesters as administrative inquiries requiring no formal investigation. This reverse domino of blockage of accountability, guys. Even if it gets to a investigation, it's not actually an investigation, see? They'll just write it off as an administrative inquiry, see? And then that's it. When they do get to an actual investigation that's not an administrative inquiry, it's like the next domino. It's like, you heard it. They can go to all the meetings and they have a union rep with them. They can literally negotiate their punishment. What the hell are we doing here? Alright, I forgot what I was even doing. Good Lord. And beyond the PSB referral, Phoenix PD did not address why officers across ranks displayed open contempt for people exercising their rights, or the impact this may have on officers' conduct in the field, the community's trust, and people's willingness to exercise their First Amendment rights in the future. Well, I'm just going to go 6,000 times harder now. What now? Guys, we're in the final stretch here. Recommended remedial measures. Hold on, let me stop for a drink. I just had some orange chicken. Alright. We're in the final couple pages. Guys, before I finish this up really quick, thank you for sticking with me. I hope you understand what this report is saying, what this report is not saying, what our leaders are responding to it are saying, and what they're not saying. Especially if you're local, especially if you care about police accountability and transparency. Guys, I hope this is a rare glimpse inside of a major police department. This is information that literally was investigated, pulled out of them, guys. It's so important to know every single word in here. Recommended remedial measures. In a 2024 report, the city outlined several new and ongoing initiatives designed to ensure constitutional policing. Phoenix and Phoenix PD acknowledge in the report that reforms are necessary, but claim that they can be achieved without the intervention of the Justice Department or oversight by a federal court. And guys, from here on out, there's going to be no need for me to put any kind of input. Let's see if I can keep that promise, though. 0 chance. Remember what all we talked about, all the different 5 major findings and the contributing factors. Remember all of this, and keep that in mind. Keep everything in mind as we look now into what they say they're going to do to fix it. Phoenix PD acknowledged the report that reforms are necessary, but claimed they could be achieved without the intervention of the Justice Department or oversight by a federal court. Our experience shows that reforms on paper are not enough to address entrenched, unlawful practices of the degree we describe in this report. And past Phoenix PD efforts, including some of those outlined in the city's report, have failed to mitigate the violations we found. Although the city's plans are a positive step, they are not enough to achieve durable reform. The initial remedial measures we recommend below provide a foundation for changes that Phoenix and Phoenix PD must make to improve public safety. But only with true accountability will the department be able to build the trust of the Phoenix community and comply with the Constitution and federal law. Use of force. Number 1, improve use of force policies, reporting, and review procedures to minimize the use of force. Revise force policies to emphasize avoiding force and increasing de-escalation, and require officers to consider less intrusive alternatives before employing force. Provide clear guidance for when certain force options, including projectiles or tasers, may be appropriate. Implement force reporting and review systems to ensure that officers report all uses of force, including neck and leg restraints, and that Phoenix PD conducts timely, thorough force reviews. Ensure that supervisors' performance reviews evaluate the quality of their force reviews. Number 2, improve use of force training. Develop new training to ensure adherence to legal requirements. Provide clear guidance to officers about when it is appropriate to use different force options and de-escalation, the duty to render aid, and the requirement to modify force as resistance changes. This should include scenario-based training and testing that reinforces these concepts. 3, enhance force-related accountability mechanisms. Require supervisors to conduct use of force supervisory reviews and identify violations of policy or law. Ensure that supervisors promptly refer evidence indicating misconduct or criminal conduct to the appropriate investigative unit or agency. Take appropriate corrective or disciplinary action when officers violate force policies. Number 4, improve data collection and assessment of force. Assess data to identify trends and develop policies, trainings, and recommendations to reduce the use of force. Ensure that supervisors in command can effectively review force data. 5, develop force policies appropriate for vulnerable populations, such as youth and people with behavioral health needs. Ensure policies recognize and account for vulnerable populations, such as children, people with behavioral health disabilities, and unhoused people. Treatment of unhoused people. Treatment of unhoused population. Improve policies and review procedures regarding the seizure and destruction of property. Revise policies to ensure that adequate notice is given before the seizure of property. Train and supervise staff to ensure that policies are uniformly followed. Staff can distinguish between personal property and abandoned items. They give proper notice before and after the seizure of property, and they create sufficient inventory records so that individuals may reclaim their property. Implement systems of supervisory review to ensure that staff are complying with policy. Improve policies and review procedures regarding the stops, detentions, and arrests of homeless people. Revise policies and review procedures on reasonable, articulable suspicion and probable cause to stop a person, unhoused or otherwise. Clarify the limits on consensual encounters. Ensure training on constitutional prohibitions. Ensure training on constitutional prohibitions is given promptly. Require reporting for all community contacts, including consensual encounters, that captures the reason for the contact, basis for stops, and results of each encounter. Implement systems of supervisory review to ensure that staff are complying with policy. 3. Improve documentation of police activity. Capture data on a person's housing status for all encounters and stops, not only arrests. How to improve identifying and reducing racial disparities. Number 1, improve documentation of police activity. Again, ensure public safety data collection allows for analysis of racial disparities, including for stops, searches, citations, arrests, force, and investigative activities. Ensure data captures the basis for enforcement action, including reasonable articulable suspicion or probable cause for stops and searches, the basis for consent searches, and the results of each search. Differentiate between traffic and pedestrian stops. Wow, we should do a whole YouTube video on just that, you guys. It's probably been done many times, but big difference is between a pedestrian and a driver. Link enforcement data with dispatch records to allow for comprehensive analysis of Phoenix PD stop data. Improve policies for discretionary enforcement. Develop policies on stops, searches, and arrests to guide officers' discretion and ensure constitutional and non-discriminatory treatment when enforcing traffic, drug, and quality of life laws. Analyze data from enforcement activity. Develop capacity to analyze data about disparities based on race or national origin in enforcement activities overall, and to assess the impact of any specialized units, initiatives, or programs. 4. Reduce unjustified disparities. Where enforcement disparities based on race or national origin exist, take steps to understand the cause of the disparities and address them. How to fix protecting First Amendment rights. Number 1, improve policies and training related to protests and demonstrations. Revise policies on responding to civil disturbances and disorderly conduct to improve planning for protests, including designating information that Phoenix PD gathers about protesters, emphasizing First Amendment freedoms, protecting the right to gather and to record police activity, limiting the use of less lethal weapons, and providing daily after-action reports about force, officer wellness, and effectiveness. Training should address the challenges of protecting public safety and First Amendment rights during demonstration, critical of law enforcement. 2, improve accountability for First Amendment violations. Ensure that force reviews and reviews of misconduct complaints assess whether an officer's conduct violated the First Amendment. Ensure that the agency consistently follows an after-action review process following protests to evaluate the performance of officers and commanders. 3, improve permitting process for protests and demonstrations. Revise permitting process to ensure that protesters can participate in spontaneous demonstrations without violating laws prohibiting obstruction of a thoroughfare. Improve external oversight of protest response. Create mechanisms for city prosecutors to help Phoenix PD identify officers' actions that may have impinged on First Amendment rights. Responding to people with how to improve responding to people with behavioral health crisis. Number 1, ensure the Phoenix PD 911 call center is dispatching appropriate responders. Update policies, procedures, and trainings for calls for service involving behavioral health issues. In doing so, collaborate with Solari and the Phoenix Fire Department to ensure that 911 operators understand when to request the assistance of a mobile team or a BHU. Prioritize 911 call center staffing issues and quality assurance processes to assess call taking, dispatches, and responses to such calls. Implement after-action reviews of calls involving behavioral health issues, including debriefings for system, call taker, and dispatcher improvement, and to ensure modifications are consistently appropriate. Number 2, improve call coding, data collection, and analysis of Phoenix PD 911 call center. Refine call coding practices to better capture the behavioral health aspects of calls. Create consistent, systemized processes to collect and analyze call data to identify the full universe of behavioral health-related calls received by the agency and the responders deployed by those calls. Develop and implement appropriate policies and training relating to behavioral health and assess their impact. Train Phoenix PD officers in proper de-escalation and appropriate modifications to activities to accommodate people with behavioral health disabilities. Provide clinically informed training for Phoenix PD officers and supervisors that delivers accurate information regarding behavioral health disabilities. Ensure policy and training addresses coordinating responses with other key actors, including Solari, mobile crisis teams, and BHUs. Track and analyze CIT certified officer responses to behavioral health related calls, including calls where force is used. Require recertification training every 2 years for all CIT officers. 4. Develop and implement appropriate quality assurance methods to assess impact and identify resource needs. Implement systems of supervisory review to ensure that officers are complying with policy. Simple. Implement systems of supervisory review of calls involving behavioral health issues, including debriefings for system and officer improvement, and to ensure modifications are consistently appropriate. Responding to youth. 1. Develop and implement policies and training appropriate for youth. Recognize the unique characteristics of youth and modify patrol practices as necessary. Develop evidence-based policies and training that addresses youth-specific characteristics and vulnerabilities. Easy. Get with the youth experts. Modify policy. Accountability. Good luck with that. Identify, address, document all allegations raised in misconduct complaints. That's all we're asking them to do, is to document all the misconduct complaints. Ensure all allegations of misconduct are accepted, comprehensively reviewed, and resolved with appropriate documentation. Explaining decision making. Hold supervisors accountable for failing to report or address misconduct. Expressly prohibit all forms of discouragement, intimidation, coercion, or retaliation against any person who makes a complaint. It's honestly insane in the membrane that they even have to say that. Do you think they can do all this, guys, without government oversight? All they have to do is start doing everything right from the ground up. They say they can do it. Require officers to report misconduct. Allow officers to report misconduct directly to PSB. Where officers fail to report misconduct, ensure that they are held accountable. Ensure protections against retaliation for officers who report the misconduct of other officers. Ensure consistent processes for investigating misconduct. Eliminate administrative inquiry investigations. Yeah, F that. Stop calling our complaints administrative inquiries. That's actually offensive to me, and I'm offended. Eliminate administrative inquiry investigations and require standardized processes for investigating misconduct complaints. What in the world is political about that? Ensure PSB reviews all findings, material evidence, and outcomes for completed investigations assigned for unit level or criminal investigation for tracking, monitoring, and qualitative assessment. Improve misconduct investigations. Guys, can they do this on their own? They say they can. Ensure all allegations of misconduct are fully investigated and that the complainants are kept up to date on the complaint status. Train Phoenix PD investigators and supervisors on investigative practices and the particular challenges of police misconduct investigations. Prohibit conflicts of interest. If you even have to say that, you've lost the conflict of interest game. They can do it on their own, they say, guys. Can they do it? Fully staffed PSB. Ensure the PSB is fully staffed with enough qualified, well-trained investigators to complete all investigations in a timely and consistent manner. Ensure that investigations are thorough. Interviews are conducted appropriately. All relevant evidence is accepted and appropriately weighed, and sound determinations of witness credibility are made where there is conflicting evidence. Facilitate external oversight. Ensure Phoenix PD provides any external oversight body, including OAT, with the broadest and most prompt access to agency data, systems, document, and personnel permitted by law. Easy. Be accountable for your own actions. Can they do it, guys? Improve the review process for PSP investigations. Streamline the review process for administrative investigations to facilitate their timely resolution. Establish reasonable time limits for each stage of review and document all decisions. Easy, just start policing correctly from the ground up. Can they do it, guys? Supervision. 1. Require a coordinated approach to public safety. Ensure commanders report to department leadership about crime trends and policing strategies. Hold command staff accountable to employing public safety strategies consistent with agency priorities and community policing principles. Easy. Just do what you say what you're going to do and do things that will help the community and stop crime. That's all we're asking you to do. Require consistent activation, deactivation, and review of body-worn cameras. People on my channel have been saying this for years. Require officers to consistently activate body-worn cameras to document interactions with the public. Require supervisors to review footage to monitor officer performance and ensure with compliance of Phoenix PD policies. It's insane that you even have to say this. Prevent officers from muting cameras. That's one of the recommendations from the Department of Justice to Phoenix PD. Prevent officers from muting cameras. Guys, what are we doing here? Require review of I'm falling apart, guys, on these last 2 pages. I'm not gonna make it. It took me weeks to get through this. I'm finally gonna die before the end. To prevent officers from muting cameras, that might be the last part I can physically get through before I die. Page 124 of 126. R.I.P. sucker. Got by the DoJ report. Number 3. Require a review of discretionary activity. Require supervisory review of the reasonable articulable suspicion for any stops and frisks, the probable cause of any searches, and the basis for any consent searches. Require periodic analysis of the efficacy of certain practices where officers have more discretion, such as pretext stops or consent searches. Enhance early identification and intervention program. Oh my God. Guys, I'm sorry. Ensure supervisors take appropriate action when they receive alerts about a subordinate. Document decision-making over whether to undertake a preventative intervention. Employ effective, tailored interventions. Easy. How to fix training. 1. Develop a comprehensive training plan. Easy. Simple, right? How to fix training. Develop a comprehensive training plan and improve and expand training department-wide. Ensure that all officers are regularly trained on constitutional policing, de-escalation tactics, procedural justice, intervening to prevent violations of law or policy, and how to respond to persons in crisis. 2. Improve and expand training department-wide. Use qualified instructors, employ best practices in adult learning, and include outside experts and community-based instructors. Increase annual in-service requirements to ensure officers receive more than 8 hours of training on constitutional policing. Oh no, it was 8 hours for something else. It was 8 hours for the crisis intervention program, I think. Either way, involve training officials and after-action evaluations of force incidents. Improve training for supervisors. Train supervisors to promote effective and constitutional police practices by leading subordinates, monitoring and assessing their performance, evaluating written reports, investigating uses of force, building community partnerships, and de-escalating conflicts. 4. Improve the field training officer program. Improve standards for training and selection of field training officers so that they will consistently model and support Phoenix PD values and standards. Standardize the field training officer program to ensure all officers and recruits are evaluated consistently and fairly. Develop a centralized policy development process. Develop a centralized policy development process. Create centralized process for developing policies and training consistent with legal requirements and community engagement principles. Oh my gosh, you guys, this is the last page. Is it a blank one that says like end? No. Conclude. Oh, good. Here we go. Look. You're telling me I just could have read this the whole time? Conclusion. The Department of Justice has reasonable cause to believe that Phoenix and Phoenix PD engage in a pattern or practice of conduct that deprives people of their rights under the Constitution and federal law. The pattern or practice includes 1. Using excessive force. 2. Violating the rights of people experiencing homelessness. 3. Using enforcement strategies that result in unjustified disparities in how police treat Hispanic, Black, and Native American people. 4. Retaliating against people who are engaged in constitutionally protected expression. And 5. Violating the rights of people with behavioral health disabilities. We also identified concerns regarding Phoenix PD's failure to use appropriate practices in encounters with children. Phoenix and Phoenix PD's unlawful practices have violated the public trust and impaired the effectiveness of policing in Phoenix. These findings are intended to help the city, Phoenix PD, and the community in Phoenix better understand the full scope of the problem and the corresponding scope of the reforms that will be needed. The United States stands ready to help with the city and Phoenix PD on a constructive path forward. And first of all, guys, they already said they don't want their help. The United States, that means the feds, right? The feds stand ready to work with the city and Phoenix PD on a constructive path forward. They said no. They said we don't want it. They said you're a political farce. They said you're going to ruin everything and that you serve only to enrich yourselves. They'll say we're a self-correcting, self-assessing police department. We can do all of these recommendations on our own. What do you guys think? Special shout out if you read through all of the report with me. I think Kinetic was here. I think there's probably more of you than I know, but for sure Kinetic, and I think Lightworker, you know, and all the rest, guys. Please pay attention to what our leaders are responding to this report, what they're saying, what they're not saying. You know, you can now say you've read it, or at least some of it or most of it. Tell me what's political about that. Thanks for watching. Love you guys.